Okay, thanks for checking us out. Today we're interviewing Jacob Horst. He is a active expert in the digital security realm. We're going to talk about a lot of that. We're going to talk about some conspiracies. Finally, we got some conspiracy talk on the show. I'm pumped about that. And of course, some freedom. Here we go. Okay, Jake, introduce yourself and let's get rocking and rolling.
Hi, my name is Jacob Horst. I'm based out of Washington D.C., but I'm a very proud New Mexican native. We're actually out there, which Ox and I, that's where we originally met. We're childhood friends. But for my career, I am in the cybersecurity field. I kind of came up in a really unique way. It kind of sounds like a movie, but it really isn't. It's more realistic than I guess a movie would be. Typical nerd, couldn't get a date in high school. Learned how to hack back in the 90s when it wasn't super illegal. And then when it became illegal, I decided to change career and get into criminal psychology. And so I kind of built up my career through that. And one day came back to cyber. And so I built out and managed the first security operations center in the history of the company Symantec, which you guys may know as the Norton antivirus people. And now I'm building out and unifying their security with a company. So it's been quite a wild ride, and I'm in a very lucky position to be kind of at the forefront of the security tip. I know all the major players, and we kind of get a lot of the insights of where things are going with security, the changes, the paradigm shifts, the technology advancements, and the unique aspect of security, which of course is, as many of you would read in the newspaper or any kind of a blog or pretty much anywhere, daily basis. Every morning when I wake up, someone else is getting hit, and these are not small, minor things. There are millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of data and underground economy and things of that nature. And we always have to be doing the ebb and flow. They hit us, we hit them. They hit us, we hit them. It's kind of this aspect of risk mitigation, securing the technology, but doing it in a way that we still can kind of use it. And it's not an easy thing to do, to say the least.
It sounds a little bit like something I'm into real big, which is red teaming. Is that something you either do or you do something similar, it sounds like?
So red teaming is more of the offensive stuff, I guess you would call it. I'm what you would consider a standard white hat. I'm a developer of risk mitigation programs, and I used to run operations. So we would incorporate it in the current program that we have. We do have red team capabilities, threat intelligence capabilities, incident response capabilities, threat monitoring capabilities, forensic capabilities, things of that nature. So it's on a higher level. I don't specifically sit on a operational team currently. I'm doing the overall development, the overall program management of a new system. So,
and what's the difference between white hat and black hat? Because I just basically learned that like a month ago.
So in a typical conversation, and now people are starting to, split it off to all kinds of different hats as well. The three main in the industry right now: white, black, and gray. White hat would be your corporate person, so someone who is working for a corporation, someone who's doing it. I would hate to say the terminology, but legitimately, someone who has a 401k, I could say, based off of cybersecurity. Black hat is somebody who's on the underground and who's doing things illegally. I think they liken it really to kind of an old west movie where the white hat is usually kind of the good, the good cowboy, and then the black hat is kind of the evil cowboy, and now the gray hat is somebody who, in our industry, we call them security researchers. That would be somebody who does penetration testing on the side, and not for an illegal mean to try to, potentially resell it, but a bug bounty program. And if folks don't know what a bug bounty program is, it's essentially a company will say, hey, try to hack our website. If you do successfully do it and you send it to us, whatever you did to break into it, and we confirm it, then we'll patch it up and we'll give you a certain amount of money. And so individuals who do that are considered gray hats because they're not officially corporate people. They're usually students, or they're people who are doing it independently, but they do it for a profitable way that's not malicious, I would say.
All right. Well, and we got you here today to talk about digital security and I guess also some AI.
Yep.
So that's a good brief for digital security, and AI is a hot topic. So I think
Sure.
Ox listed a couple articles about Putin and
Yeah.
some AI. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
So AI is the new next generation paradigm shifting thing that is going to change the world entirely. And I think one of the articles that he's referencing was Putin stating that
That's right.
whoever figures out AI is going to essentially be the god of the new generation. It is going to happen. There's no question in my mind. One of the big things in the industry right now, and probably for the last couple of years, has been machine learning. What we call machine learning, which for the folks at home that may not know what it is, it's essentially taking algorithms, taking huge giant data sets, just terabytes and terabytes of data, getting a baseline of that data, and then building, further algorithms to get more refinement. And essentially what the machine is doing in a more, a more stringent way is learning the similar way that the human being does, in the sense of human beings, the way that we learn is through experience. And so as children, when we learn something, when we experience something, then we put it into our brain, and then we build off of that, and we build off of that, and we develop biases through that, and we develop skills through that. Essentially what machine learning is doing is trying to replicate that. And so instead of looking at a giant huge data set, what it's doing is it's actually understanding the data to a point. Now, it's not exactly the way human does, because human does a lot of reasoning. To replicate that is a very difficult thing to do. But what it does allow to do is to go through huge giant data sets that human beings wouldn't be able to understand, and be able to pull out anomalies, pull out trends, pull out things of that nature, and essentially identify key pieces of information that then it further quote unquote learns on. One of the things that is huge, and this is something that people should understand about technology. If you follow one certain piece of technology throughout history, it has been the key thing that changes essentially everything else around technology, and it's storage. Storage. People usually think, faster processors, or they think networking, things of that nature. And the reality is it's storage. And why is it storage? Well, if you can store something, you can process it. You can change it. You can develop something on top of it. You can manipulate it. You can do things with it. And so a couple of articles that I was talking to Ox about previously, one of the big things that came out recently is SanDisk. SanDisk is a micro SD card,
Yeah, the little blue
maker for
things.
storage. Sure. They've been able to put 400 gigabytes onto a small little blue thing. 400 gigabytes. That's almost half a terabyte. That's a lot of data. And that's on something that's the size of a penny.
Dude, when I was in high
It's
school, you know how much
ridiculous.
I was paying for, what was it? 250 megabytes? You were paying
Maybe,
50,
yeah.
60 bucks
And that was still a
more.
pretty decent size,
Yeah,
it
that
was
was a
about the
big
size of a
deal.
lighter. But so it's getting to a point to where we're shifting. And another big thing that happened is IBM has announced recently that they've built out a magnetic tape drive that can handle a lot more. It's approximately, and let me pull up the exact amount because I don't want to be a liar on this. So it's approximately 330 terabytes on a tape drive. It's the most dense tape drive in existence. 330 terabytes. That's equivalent to 330 million books approximately on a tape drive, on a single tape drive. And so what happens is when you
How
grab
big,
data,
how big is a
go ahead.
tape drive?
A tape drive's probably the size of a little bit bigger than a cassette.
Wow.
Yeah, it's and it's used more for your server backups and things of that nature. But what that allows for us to do, along with the advent of cloud computing, is process data in a substantial way, to be able to manipulate data, to be able to place data in smaller areas in a
Hmm.
more dense manner, and then utilize it in ways which people can say maybe Skynet related or something of that nature, eventually coming up to the point to where we're not going to need these physical, iPhones that have storage within it. It's going to be something that is just held in a central location, a giant hive mind of multiple high density items, and your memory on your phone is just going to be some little tiny conduit between the hive mind and the individual, I guess.
Oh, so they're, God, man, that's 330 million books on one cassette.
One cassette, one cassette. And think it was only 10, 15 years ago, we can maybe pull off a small album on a giant disc. It's going faster. And when it gets to a point to where we can hold such a substantial amount of data that we can program entire artificial intelligence interfaces on them, that's when things are going to change. And I'll tell you, you guys have an angle of freedom. I mean, the podcast has got this liberty-minded ideology. The truth about it is we're going to move fast, quickly away from that and jump into a position of, I would almost say Hobbesian theory, the idea that I hate the idea of monarchy, but the idea of a benevolent dictator being the perfect leader. Because what we've done within the history of civilization is we've traded freedom often for safety. I mean, if we go back to prehistoric world and when we came into social contract and built civilization up, a lot of that was this idea that, hey, the world's a dangerous place. People forget that nature is a very dangerous place. We go out hiking thinking, oh, it's just a nice walk for the day. Well, if you're by yourself and you slip and you fall, you're dead.
Yeah.
Animal attacks you, you're dead. It's actually a dangerous thing. Bears are out there, things of that nature. And so what we did as human beings, well, at least the theory, if you ever want to go back and read some Hobbesian Leviathan, is that it was better to deal with each other than it would be to deal with nature. And so we started forming these civilizations and in the basis of social contract, and social contract being I agree not to kill you if you agree not to kill me. We can trade, we can help each other develop, because it's a very self-serving ideology. And so as we developed up through civilization, I don't want to go too far in a tangent into Hobbesian philosophy, we saw these certain aspects, created. Civilization started to develop, and people started to buy into social contract without actually buying into it. The way that someone born in America is automatically a U.S. citizen, no one signed up for that. It's just part of what your existence is. It's part of civilization. And a lot of people would say, well, I'm kind of, a very free thinker. I'm away from civilization. And I said, well, you bought into social contract. And they say, no, I don't. And I say, here's an example. And this is a perfect example that I tend to use when I talk at universities and stuff about social contract. I say, you're at a four-way stop, middle of the night. You're on the sidewalk, way away from it. There's nobody else on any of the sidewalks, very, very far away. There's nobody. There's nobody. It's just a dead, four-way stop. And you see a car coming, and he speeds right through the stop sign. And the first thing to say is, well, that's fucked up. But why was it fucked up? There was nobody in danger. Well, theoretically, there could have been somebody in danger. Theoretically, the issue wasn't the fact that someone was in danger. The issue wasn't the fact that it was something that actually happened in front of you and it was something that threatened you. It was that individual broke a social contract, broke one of the rules of this contract that we all bought into, quote unquote. And so when you're thinking about this social contract and how we've essentially traded a lot of our freedoms for safety over generations, it's going to continue. And when AI comes in, perfect example again, look at your autonomous cars. Think of what happens when you get in your car. You can drive anywhere. I can get in a car and drive down to Alabama right now. I don't know why I would want to, but just put it out there. I could. There's actually a really nice girl down there, so it wouldn't be a bad idea. But I can do that. That's perceived freedom. I could do that. I've got petrol or I've got gas in my vehicle. I could drive. Well, what about the autonomous car? Okay, so I buy an autonomous car. Well, I still own it, and I can still program it to go to Alabama. Well, what if one day, I don't own it, I lease it, and then I'm at the whim of somebody else? So my movement is suddenly restricted. Well, okay, I mean, that's great because now I'm safer. There's no car wrecks. People are safer, quote unquote, quote unquote. And then it comes down to the basis of, well, I didn't even realize it, but I gave up a substantial amount of my freedom for this perceived safety.
What's funny about that? A lot of people are talking about this in the tech world is AI cars, or at least self-driving cars, and how great it's going to be. But they, just like you said, they don't understand that as soon as you take that responsibility away from yourself, someone else takes care of it for you. Like you said, that's a big loss in your liberty.
It's huge power to somebody else, and you don't know who. The crazy thing about the human mind and the way that we essentially accept change is if it happens drastically, we immediately push it away. We're like, that's too much. But if we do it very slowly, we accept almost anything. You look at Facebook, for instance, and I like to talk about this. So MySpace came out. People threw all of their information on there. And they're like, well, that's probably not a smart idea because we just gave all of our information to some random person. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to erase all my crap. They already got all the MySpace stuff, but I'm going to erase all the crap, yada, yada, yada. Bam, Facebook comes out. I'm going to throw all my crap on there. Well, that's probably not good. Well, okay, let me get rid of my Facebook. I'm not going to do that. Boom, Snapchat comes out. Well, not only do I put all my crap up there, now I'm taking pictures of my life.
With your GPS,
Pokemon Go,
pictures, yeah.
Pokemon Go comes out, I just gave somebody my entire view of my entire inside of my house. It's like this thing of we don't learn, or we would rather be adhering to some kind of a comfort zone or some kind of an entertainment if it's very slow to us, if it's not super detrimental to us, and will allow them to take more and more slowly. So if it happens super fast, if tomorrow someone comes and they took my car away and threw this thing in front of me, I would say no. But in 10 years, after I've already owned an autonomous car and drove it around, well, you know what? I just want to kind of read while I go on my way to work. I can live an hour away and sleep on my way to work. Well, then one day someone's going to come and say, you know what? We developed this new AI. You don't even have to program it because we've already followed you throughout the years. We already know your patterns. We know what you like to do. Oh, and by the way, we'll put a movie up so you can watch it on the way. This comfort. We embrace that without even really understanding that it's at the cost of what we would perceive as our true freedom. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, depending on your perspective, because a curious thing that I think about psychology today, and of course, stats are kind of hazy in this because it's not something that's it could be overblown by pharmaceutical companies, or could be overblown, and Ox can probably talk to this better than I can. But anxiety disorders are a huge thing. Psychology and pharmacology and those kinds of things. A curious thing with the human brain right now is we're basically in the safest, most healthy part of human history and existence, yet there's this fear and this anxiety-ridden human being. It's this ideology where we have this need to protect ourselves naturally in some way, yet every single thing that we do is almost there to take away that threat. And so when we're looking at the threat of car accidents, we're saying we don't want to give up our freedom, but we're absolutely going to go for autonomous cars. I absolutely will. I'm not going to lie. I absolutely will. I would totally love that. A robotic butler, some machine that's going to cook my food and clean my house, all this Jetson stuff. I'm willing to do that. My physical body is kind of telling me this probably isn't good because you're built to run long distances and hunt animals and do these other things. But yet every single thing that we're doing within human society is to almost take us out of the physical world. And we can kind of go down that pathway if you want to as well. I don't know if you ever saw Wall-E and you saw
Oh, I loved it. Yeah.
the fat creatures. My belief, and this may be controversial, but my belief is that the next human evolution is going to be out of the physical body. And as we look at machines, we look at the way that machines are created and AI is created. They're reliant on us to mate because they can't mate, they can't have sex, they can't procreate. So they rely on us to procreate. We procreate, we create more of them. They make our lives better. We procreate, we make more of them. It comes to a point to where one day machines are going to be able to do that. And what is in an evolutionary sense, the weakest link of all of that? The body that gets sick, the body that gets old, the body that's weak. So eventually I believe that we're going to evolve into consciousness and live inside of a machine, and it'll probably be like Lawnmower Man, except a little bit updated on the graphics basis, but pretty chill for the most part. So
I'm a huge space fan, and there's 2 points I wanted to bring back in the conversation. One was when you said nature is a little bit dangerous for a guy to just stand around in nature.
Yeah.
And one of the podcasts I love is Neil deGrasse Tyson. So
Yeah.
he says, all these people say, oh, this is this perfect pearl for us to live in, and we're so happy and healthy and safe, but you drop a person by himself, naked, on 90% of the planet, and they're screwed.
Dead.
They're dead. And if you drop them in, I don't know, so far 99% in outer space or on another planet, well, as far as we've seen, 100%, dead. So I love that people think that this is made perfectly for us, except all the things that can kill us.
Yeah.
And then the second one,
which is everything.
Everything. And the other one was space sex. So on that same podcast, I think they talked about one of the ways they're looking at, instead of just shooting a laser beam in space and saying, we're here, one of their recommended paths is you take a robot and you launch him out of our solar system. But when he gets where he's going, he collects things, builds another robot, and then they split up. And they say that once they do that, it takes the total amount of time that it would take to spread our message to, I don't know, 100 different galaxies. They say it cuts it down like 90%.
Sure, exponential spread, yeah.
Sure. So space sex, I guess people are working on it. If it's
It's a curious thing because you got to wonder why we need that, why we need to do that. Like what's your interest in space? Like where does that come from?
My interest in space is because I'm curious, but if we're talking about this in liberty, I don't think you should, because I think it's super cool,
Mhm.
doesn't mean I think you should force me at the end of a gun to launch your little rocket and do your little experiments.
Do you think that there's benefit to going into space?
I don't think that I have a direct benefit in my life. People say that all the time. They say, "Oh, you get so much out of NASA, like Velcro and fucking Tang."
No.
I don't give it. You mean to tell me no one would invent Velcro without NASA? So you have to literally hold a gun to my face and take my money so that you can invent Velcro.
It's a hard thing because like when I think about space too, and I'm not a space fan. I don't know if that's a thing where it's like, yo, space kind of sucks. I don't know if that's a thing, but my curiosity has always been with the basis of like look at how weak the human body is, and I mean we do a lot of amazing things. We've got a frontal cortex, our amygdala is pretty dope, things of that nature. But you said about the 99% or however much percentage
Hmm.
of the world is covered in seawater.
Hmm.
How crappy is the human body that we can't drink an ounce of that
Drives
naturally? Like
drives me
we have to.
nuts.
It's like it's right there. It's something that we need for survival. By the way, all of that you can't drink, or if you do, it'll kill you.
Hmm.
It's this idea that we are so focused on this other outwardly dream-based ideology, which does have its place, when we haven't even really explored this own planet and how to deal with our own selves within the planet. Now, I'm not saying genetically modifying us with gills, although that would kind of be cool.
That'd be pretty
Um,
sweet.
it's just this idea where if we're launching things into outer space without a real understanding of why we're doing it, except for curiosity, sure, we might find something cool, but there's also a good chance that there's absolutely nothing out there. And our focus has been looking up at the stars for so long that one day we may look around and realize, you know what, we kind of neglected what we were doing here. Not in a hippie way where it's like, save the planet, go vegan, but more of the idea of why don't we just kind of work on the human existence first? And then when it evolves to a place to where, okay, we can easily get into space and see where we can take that, let's kind of focus on that later. I don't know. It's probably a controversial thing. I'm sure a lot of science people,
Oh yeah.
astrophysicists and stuff are going to hate on me about that. But I watch professional wrestling, so I'm not much of an academic as it is. So
I think some people say the same thing about Mars, like, "Oh, let's go terraform Mars." Oh, well, we can't terraform Earth, so
yeah.
let's get that down first. Well, I feel the same way. If you're going to steal my money at the point of a gun, maybe figure out how to give some of that back to me, or at least do something constructive with it
In
instead of
society.
burning it in outer space.
It's a hard one for me. I was actually quite inebriated last night, which is a surprise to nobody. Coming back in an Uber, and I don't remember how me and the Uber guy started talking about it, but I did kind of approach because he told me something he likes space or so. I don't even know how he got into that kind of a conversation, but in my non-sobriety ridden conversation, I asked him legit. I was like, "Did we go to the moon?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I'm
Oh,
like,
I
"How do
love
you
that.
know?" And he was just kind of like, "Well, I don't know." And I was like, "Well, I don't know either." And at the end of it, how are we still debating on whether we went to the moon or not? And I mean, I know this can be
Hmm.
that rabbit hole of an Eddie Bravo
Well,
kind of an
I'm
aspect.
game if you want to get into it. That's cool with me.
But the thing that troubles me about it is there's so much evidence that we went. There's so much debate that we didn't. What has it earned us in the end? I'm still not sure. I mean, your perspective, straight up. Do you think that we went to the moon, as in Neil Armstrong on the ground, straight up? The way that it was played out on television back, when my parents were kids or whatever.
Okay, after a short break here, our buddy Jack, Captain Jack, joined us.
Hello.
And Jack, we are just about to get into the moon conspiracy. So Jake asked me, what is my opinion on the moon? Did we go? Did we get Neil Armstrong on the ground, boots on deck? Um, I think that the answer to that is no, at least initially. I'm still shaky on if we went ever. I think at first and at second and at third we might not have went those first few times. If we did go, I mean, I I'm willing to leave it open for the later missions, but I know at a minimum we've been lied to. So
By who? By who? Like, are we talking the U.S. government? Are we talking
I
like
think,
who would be lying to us?
well, I mean, we could do this for about an hour. So here's my concerns. Russia beat the shit out of us at every single space obstacle, period, on the way there.
Yep.
All of a sudden, we shoot out of nowhere. We say, oh, we're going to go way past you and we'll put people there. So we go, and the only people that have access to the evidence that we went was just NASA/government. So there was no other reporter, there was no second or third party viewer or recorder. All the information came from only one source. And I know a lot of
Right.
people use the argument, well, how could that many people keep a secret? Well, the Manhattan Project was kind of big, and that was kept a secret. The government keeps all sorts of secrets for a long time. And well, people would talk. Well, people talk about a lot of things a lot of times, and I think if you go check out the Corbett report, you'll see that he thinks that several people get suicided from the
Yeah.
government, which I agree with. I'm pretty sure that does happen.
Especially if you're involved with the Clintons.
Yeah. Well,
Not be shocked.
Seth Rich. Yeah.
So I know that NASA has sent out pictures that were false or not correct. I know they sent out edited pictures. I know that they've recorded all the steps of the training to go to the moon, and they wanted it to look very realistic. So they had a product that was a moon landing before they even went. I don't think that's debatable. I think people know we recorded a practice training set. We recorded audio. We pretended we were going. We pretended we landed. We pretended we flew back home. And I don't think we had the technology to do it. I don't know how we got past the Van Allen radiation belt.
Yeah.
I think some of the interviews with the astronauts were very suspicious. And that's just my baseline off the top of my head from what I can remember. That's kind of like some of my biggest pushes with that one. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Jake.
So it's very difficult for me because I was raised believing that we did, and I tend to be a conspiracy debunking kind of a person. I think that Occam's razor, the simplest answer is usually the correct answer. But with the moon landing, so back to my classical training, I guess you could say, in criminal theory. There's this thing within criminology called mens rea, otherwise known as the criminal mind. It's the criminal intention. The two sides. I'm not going to get too deep into criminology, but actus reus is criminal action, mens rea is criminal mind. The way that you can differentiate them in a realistic situation is: I'm driving down the street, a homeless guy jumps in front of my car. I kill him. I did a criminal action technically because I killed somebody with my vehicle, but I didn't have the intention. This is how they separate out first-degree murder from second and things of that nature. When you're thinking about intention, you got to think about what would somebody's intent to lie be. And as you stated, it was to beat Russia. It was to bring America up, and we did. That surrounded the war efforts. It surrounded a lot of American exceptionalism within our society. When we go back and talk about, well, someone would have talked about it. That was a different time in two ways. One, information couldn't be as disseminated as it does now within the internet, things like Snowden and such. Information didn't travel that far, that quickly, and that easily back in those days. And secondly, think of yourself as a scientist, similar to what happened in the Manhattan Project. Growing up in New Mexico, Los Alamos was just 20 minutes north of us. Knew a lot of people who worked there. My grandfather worked there. My dad worked there. It was a thing of, what if you're a scientist and you get brought into a room, or a whole group of scientists get brought into a room with generals and stuff, and say, hey, for America, for your homeland, we've got to do this. This is why. Don't talk about it, but please, can you help us out? To me, it's not such a far stretch for those people to not talk, because this idea of patriotism, this idea of, we're doing it for the greater cause, we're doing it for this mission, we're doing it to beat the Russians, the evil communists at the time. To me, that's not such a far stretch. And so when you look at this idea of the radiation belt, this idea that we had to beat the Russians, this idea that we had flopped so many times and suddenly we power right past them, couple it up with all of these weird things about the photos and things. My personal opinion is I go from being sure that we landed to simply, I have no clue. I have no clue. I don't know. What about you, Jack? What do you think, Jack? What do you think?
I just have one question. Why haven't we been back?
You could talk. Yeah, that's.
I mean,
yeah.
Dude, why haven't? I mean, there's tons of reasons why we should go back. So why haven't we been back? I don't understand that aspect of it. I don't know if we did or not. It's kind of pointless for me to argue it because I don't know any of the facts. So I just have one question and that is, why haven't we been back?
And that's a weird thing because that we is basically the human race, not just Americans. But why has the human race not been back. The Russians, the Chinese, the Indians.
Exactly.
That's
Well,
weird.
You said you did some study in criminology, right,
Yeah.
Jake? So, my old man was what I think was a brilliant detective. I loved his stories, man, growing up. And I used to talk to him about some conspiracy stuff, and I'd say, well, I remember one of the first lessons he taught me about detective work was, he said, "Hey, son, here's how you do interviews. Here's how you figure out people's intent. Here's an example. A guy's house burns down. Did he do it or not?" I said, "Well, Dad, I don't know." The guy says to you, "I'm totally innocent. My house burned down. I'm sob story. I need my insurance money." And you go, "Seems legit, yes or no?"
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Okay, Dad. Well, it seems legit. If my house burned down, I would want the insurance money." He goes, "Okay. Next question. Sir, what did you lose in the fire?" And he says, "Well, I lost almost everything, but my prized trophies and my stash of gold and silver, I was able to move out of the house just the other day, so they're safe."
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "What do you think now?" I said, "Well, now I don't, lucky him." He said, "Well, try again." I was very young. And he said, "Try again." I said, "He moved the stuff out on purpose before the fire." He says, "Now we're getting somewhere." And he says, "What do you do if the guy says, 'My house burned down, but don't worry, I already raked everything up and I already put it all into a pile and I already had the dump trucks come take all the burnt ashes away, so it's a clean lot now. Just do your investigation and get me my money.'"
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "What do you think the fire marshal would do for his inspection to figure out how the fire started?" And said, "Well, he really couldn't figure it out, could he?" He said, "Aha." So he's giving me all these little nuggets of information. And now that I'm older, I say, hey, Dad, how do we go to the moon? And how do you know we went? Well, I saw it on TV. I said, let me ask you this. What if I told you I went to the moon and you watched me do it on a video screen, and then when I got back, you said, "Hey, do you have any moon rock?" And I said, "Well, here's moon rock." And then you test it and it's petrified wood. What would you think? "Well, accident, mistake, it's fine." I go, "Okay, well, what if I had the records of the GPS and whatnot of where my ship was, but I lost those records? What would you say?" Yeah, well, it sounds a little fishy. "Okay, what if I gave you photos and in the background was my swimming pool in Earth?"
Mm-hmm.
"Well, yeah, I'd say, obviously you're not on the moon." And I go, these kind of things actually happen with NASA. So with the intent, I can see based on their actions, maybe if they went, their actions sure look a little suspicious with, "Oh, we lost everything. Oh, we did it for sure 10 times, but we definitely can't do it again." Well, technology got better. Why can't you
Way
do
better.
it? Well, we lost a lot of it. Well, you didn't have it to begin with 30, 40 years ago. So I am definitely questionable. I'm almost certain that the first time we didn't go at all. We
Mm-hmm.
may have gone after that. I'm open to yes or no either way, but I'm sure that there's definitely some intent.
We had every reason to lie, and that's the hardest part. Is we unequivocally had every reason to lie. If it was a situation where there wasn't a space race or something, I would be like, you know what? Why would the Occam's razor? We went there. Why? Because we just didn't have any other explanation, and it looks like it. There were a couple mistakes, but to me, the fact that there is so much intent to lie, there'd be so much benefit, I guess you could say, that it at least at very minimum opens up the question for debate. And I think it has been up. I do think that there are debunked things. And one of the things that does happen with conspiracy theories is it goes down a really, really slippery slope
Oh
really
yeah.
quickly if you don't pull it in. It's the same thing about, well, you've got some, group of bankers who control the world. And oh, by the way, they drink the blood of babies and they're reptilian and yeah, David Icke kind of things. It goes down a very slippery slope really quickly. And I think that inhibits a lot of these theories because people are able to look at it and be like, "Oh, you just believe in reptilians." It's like, no, actually, there are some bankers and some companies that control the world. Yeah, but you believe they're reptilians just like those other crazy people. Or this moon thing. It's like, oh, you believe that we all lied and it was all filmed on a soundstage by Stanley Kubrick. And it was like, I didn't talk about Stanley Kubrick. I just think that we have to debate about it. So I think that is something that often inhibits what you can call, I guess, conspiracy theories is you start opening up that question. And instead of just asking, well, why or what actually happened, instead of just taking the official story and stuff, I think people start injecting their own beliefs, their own biases, which is a human thing to do. And it kind of goes into something that is so far out of the way of reality that it's easy to discount it.
Okay, so we're talking artificial intelligence, we're talking digital security, we're talking conspiracies, which I love.
Hmm.
I'll do a recap of what people ask me that all the time. They say, "Where do you stand on all these conspiracies?" I'll say, "Okay, well, in general, with all of these conspiracies, I don't believe that our government is made of lizard people. I do believe the government lies to us all the time." I say I'm right in the middle there somewhere. So I think people usually get a kick out of that.
I like the reptilian. I think that they're all reptilian. I'm cool with that. I'll go with that.
I, I'd be
Um,
happy to talk about it.
They may
it's
not all
hard.
be all reptilian, but they're definitely all assholes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're cold-blooded for sure. One of the things, and not to go too deep into conspiracy, but one thing that has always fascinated me, and especially living in the DC region now, I hope I don't end up disappearing because of this, but the Masonry symbology, the Freemason symbology all over the place in DC, all over. I mean, you can go to almost any small town and they have a Scottish Rite Temple or they have a Masonic lodge, and to me, that's always something curious because growing up Catholic, I grew up Catholic because in New Mexico it's not really a choice, or at least when I was growing up, it wasn't a choice. There were a lot of Catholic churches everywhere. Every little town had one. But as people started losing religiosity, as I'm no longer really a Catholic, I mean, I put sign up on a paper and say I maybe am one, but I definitely don't attend or anything. The churches go away. The temples go away. There's not as much of them, except unless you're in Alabama or the South. But yet there's these Masonic temples. There's these meeting houses everywhere. Someone has to be going to them. Someone has to be doing something with them. That the funding has to come from somewhere. It's always a curious thing to me, and I know people who are Masons. Of course they don't proclaim anything. Most of them say it's just a networking thing or whatever. But to me, let's go back to motivation and intention. Why is there symbology within George Washington and symbology within why is our national monument a giant monolith like an obelisk? Sorry, that's Egyptian in nature.
Kind of like in 2001: A Space Odyssey, they had a couple of those obelisks, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yep.
it's why that's the other thing is someone had to sit there and say, I want this here. I want it to look like this. I want it to be in the shape of this, or I want this building here, or there's purpose to it. My big question has always been who, what, and why, and that one's really troublesome for me because I'll drive by, and like I went to and I told you I watch wrestling. Yes, it's shameful. If there's anything that ever comes out of my life that I'm so truly ashamed of, it's the fact that I absolutely love professional wrestling. And I know it's fake. I know everybody, but damn it, I love it.
Hey,
But I actually,
it's no more fake than politics.
well, I would actually rather have wrestlers than politicians up on the
Absolutely.
pulpit because you could hit somebody with a steel chair and get things done.
Right.
But it's this idea. So I went down and I watched in Norfolk, Virginia, in a Masonic hall. I watched a local independent wrestling event. I'll tell you, it had everything perfect in the world, in my opinion. Juggalos. The manager
Yeah.
of the AutoZone was like the world champion or whatever. I don't know what they call him there. But looking around this Masonic temple, it was a giant auditorium. It had a lot of these weird symbology, the two eagle thing, and it had the two posts. I forgot what they call them, the Zoab and the whatever. It just had all these different things, the checkered boards and stuff. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, first it's completely surreal because I'm watching independent wrestling in Norfolk, Virginia,
Ugh.
with juggalos. But on the other side of it, it was this thing of all of this stuff is paid for by somebody. Its purpose is there, and we just all accept it. Be like, oh yeah, that's the Masonic Lodge. No one really asks, what is a Masonic Lodge? Who's actually going there? Why is it there? Why was George Washington a Mason? Why was he wearing his Masonic gear when you go into the National Capitol? You could see paintings with him with that stuff. Why does Denver Airport have so many wacky ass Masonic references? And was it the New World Airport Commission on the cornerstone and things of that nature? There's a lot of things that I always question of what the heck's going on there. And maybe it is just a bunch of bored old men who have nothing better to do than just kind of play around with these secret clubs, or maybe it's something more.
I tell you what, if I were super rich and super powerful, I sure as shit would have a secret club.
I would fuck with people. Yeah,
Hell
I
yes.
would do that. Yeah. And I think the Georgia Guidestones is that. I'll just be honest. If you guys don't know about that, I think that is just someone super rich, bored, and wanting to fuck with people.
That
But
was recent, wasn't it? With there's
I
something
wouldn't
written on
doubt it.
that. Do you want to?
yeah,
There's a whole bunch of things in different languages written on it.
yeah. So basically, what it is down in Georgia is someone built this little kind of monument that has, these inscriptions that essentially say that like all of society, all the world has to die, and you only keep 1 million people or some junk like
Oh,
that.
that's
You
right.
guys have
Yeah.
to look it up. And no one's ever claimed that no one's ever claimed it. And supposedly there's a groundskeeper that comes and cleans it up, but he doesn't talk to anybody. And it's just one of these things where it could be some kind of, prophecy, or it could be just a really rich old dude being like, you know what? I ain't got nothing better to do right now. I'm kind of into reading, Rational Wiki and these conspiracy things, and watch the Rogan podcast, and I want to just kind of fuck with people. So it's a very possible, big possibility that is a legit thing. I
I
don't
love
know.
it, man. I can go down
Yeah.
that rabbit hole all day.
Yep.
Problem is the rabbit hole. What does it lead to? Maybe it's just entertainment at the end of the day. I don't know.
Well, I'll put in a plug real quick. So, this is a Liberty Mastermind podcast. We like to give some people some value on each show. And I think being informed about AI and about digital security is huge value. And if we're getting into conspiracies, there's still some value there too. So, what good does that do you? What does that provide you? Well, if you look into some of them and you find out on some of them that the government clearly fucking lied to you and mistreated people, maybe you start living your life with a little bit of liberty so that you don't have to rely on these lying motherfuckers to get shit done in your life or to protect yourself or to provide for yourself. So I think there is some value there. If you can see that maybe our super overlords don't really give a shit about us, good. Now you know that. Now you can start making change in your own life. So I do think there's some value in that. Yeah, you can get lost down the rabbit hole and do nothing with your life. But man, knowing when people are bullshitting you, I think is a really important skill set in life. I'm off my soapbox. I'm done.
By the power of water filters, we're getting Alex Jones up in here. It's a curious thing that I think that we need to investigate for ourselves. And I know that we went way off of cybersecurity and digital security. If you want to pull back that way, I have no problem with doing that as well. But these kinds of things, I think, are things that people need to discuss, just at the very minimum, to open up their mind, just to say that, this is a possibility, and not to take it down a rabbit hole of reptilian overlords who eat babies, although that's still a possibility, I guess. But to be able to just say, you know what, I learned something. I know what a Masonic temple is now. I've got experience in this, and I can talk to it a little bit, or at least read more into it, and enhance your own life. And like you said, liberty is truthfully freedom, and freedom comes from being aware and reading and understanding the world around you.
That is a perfect closing to our Liberty questions that we like to ask each guest. So we have 5 questions here,
Okay.
and we'll give you those, and you can either do the lightning round with a short soundbite answer, or you can kind of do a moderate dive into it. So
Okay.
I'll give you question number 1. So impacts. This is our impact question. What is one of your top concerns that can or that does have an impact on your liberty or your lifestyle? And that can be either a good thing or a bad thing in your life.
To me, it's the judgment calls that are being made by large governmental officials on both sides of the coin, and I would say probably most problematic for me is I'm right in the middle on most debates. I would be considered probably more liberal than conservative on a lot of social issues, but my discomfort comes, and we can even call it the media or people who are kind of dictating dialogue. You look at Berkeley, you look at Charlottesville, things of that nature. They're forcing me to care, and I think that the more that they force me to care and force other people to care, you get a dialogue in there that I don't think is realistic. Are there atrocities that happen? Yes. Are there Nazis walking around? No. I mean, it's not like suddenly these Nazis came out of nowhere and they're going for the Third Reich in America kind of a thing. But then on the opposite side, we also have this Antifa and all this other, counter stuff, and they've got a dialogue and stuff. And I'm sitting on the side saying, hey, I'm just a dude that goes to work, and now suddenly I have to deal with protests, I have to deal with all these other things. And I don't believe that that's a realistic view. So my fear is whoever's writing the dialogue, whether it's one side or two sides, I think they're starting to dictate a social change that is going to negatively affect me because, quite frankly, A, I don't want Nazism. B, I don't want, communism or anarchy or anything like that. I'm very concerned about who has the power of the messaging within our society.
And I think there's a conspiracy answer for that one that I like.
Oh God.
Okay. Number 2, this is our motivation question. So Ox likes this question a lot. So when life is challenging and you have your what we call character building days, is there something that you do to kind of bring mental relaxation or insight or clarity to yourself?
Alcohol, yes, lots of alcohol.
Fucking super. You're in good company.
There's a lot of clarity that happens there, and then a lot of non-clarity that follows. Really, with me, one motivating factor that I really kind of drive towards is I've got to believe that that I'm doing something that means something, and we all want to be something in the world, not necessarily have a statue to our name or anything, but we want to feel like we have purpose. And I guess if we were talking religious anything, I'm a hardcore existentialist. I love this idea of existence. I love Camus. I love Sartre. I love a lot of French people. Oddly enough, that's a weird thing. But with me, there's this essence, this defining of what your value is by your own standards. It's this idea that there's a burger flipper out there, someone who works at McDonald's, that someone on the outside may look at them and say, you're just a McDonald's worker, but they're saying, yeah, but I'm the best and I'm number one, and that's what matters to me. In my opinion, what I've defined for myself is to be a very good cybersecurity person, to know really stupid trivia about wrestling, to have really cool cats, and just to have these simple things and to be the best at them. And by my very definition, there's some people out there that think that the all-American dream. I have friends, because I'm 36 years old. I have friends with families and things of that nature. And I have people that say, you know what? I felt like I was supposed to do this, and this, get married to my high school sweetheart, go to college, have kids, yada, yada. And they're so unhappy. And it's because their value was not what they actioned upon. It was someone else's ideology. And so when I say motivation and what motivates me, when I wake up in the morning, I think about, you know what am I going to do today? What matters to me? What do I want to accomplish? And then I go out there and I do it. And if I fail at it, then the next motivation after that is the same thing plus I'm going to do better than yesterday. So I would say defining your values, and then actioning upon them.
Awesome.
Yeah, very nice.
Our next one is mantras. So a mentor once told Ox, he's got 2 of these questions in here, that jerk. A mentor once told Ox, start every day happy. So me and Ox and Jack, one of us will usually text the other 2 in the morning. We'll say, wake up happy. So that's something we tell each other almost every day. Do you have any favorite mantras or quotes that you say often that you think the audience might be interested in adopting?
God, Ox is such a hippie. If you guys don't know it yet, he is such a hippie. I love him, and I have to admit, I kind of know where he does get it, but sometimes I'm always reminded, because he's such a cool guy and stuff, and I'm like, oh, I forgot you've got this really hippie side to you, power of positivity and things of that nature. So so with me, it's mostly existential stuff, and you can get into a really negative slope with existentialism. I did one thing that I kind of regret to a point, because when I'm out in bars and stuff, and I like to read, I don't like to go out with people usually. Or I like to go out by myself because I'm a computer nerd and I'm a shut-in, but I also like alcohol. It's one of those things where sometimes people come up and ask you about, what are you reading? And this one guy, I was in Winnipeg, Canada. Sorry, anybody in Winnipeg, but it's kind of a dreadful place. A good hockey team. I love hockey too, but not much is going on in Winnipeg. It's an interesting place. Sorry for those Canadians, but they won't beat me up because Canadians are nice people. But I gave him a book, and it happened to be a Nietzsche book, and then it was a thing where we kind of touched base, and he was kind of going through a crisis in his life. His girlfriend had just broken up with him, and so we were talking philosophy and psychology and things of that nature. Didn't know the guy at all. He was actually from Minnesota, and he had driven up to get away. And I gave him the book, and I saw him go from, yeah, things are okay, to, I've been reading this Nietzsche stuff, it's really cool, to kind of a very depressed guy. And so you have to be very understanding about where Nietzsche came from, where Camus comes from, and Sartre and Heidegger and Kierkegaard, these guys, where they're coming from. And sometimes it is from a place of a lot of darkness, which I personally like. I guess I'm a sick person in that way. But on the opposite side, there is value to it. And so a couple of quotes I like of Camus. It's men must live and create, live to the point of tears. I think that one's a very important one specifically for me, because like what I'm doing today, One of the reasons why I left my previous job, and they were amazing to me. Loved it, loved the company. They gave me opportunities that I'd never have had with any other group except for, of course, my current company. But we were doing operations, meaning it was just doing the everyday thing. And one of the things that I find valuable in my life personally is to create something, to show the world that I was there, to have some kind of a vested interest in something. And so at this current job, it's creating something. And so I like that idea of men must live and create, live to the point of tears. It's this idea of you have to do it with all of you. That is almost the very existence of life. And you do it to the point to where it's just the very last ounce of your emotional being. And that's something that you're obligated to do as a human being.
That was a good one, man. I don't know if I've ever read much Nietzsche, but maybe I'll start getting into it.
Yeah, that was Camus. So Nietzsche, you don't necessarily want to read. That was Albert Camus. So
Oh,
Albert
okay.
Camus is
Wrong reference.
amazing. I completely recommend Camus. So I recommend if you want to read Sartre, I'll say it in non-French but English. Sartre, Sartre. La Nausea. That's a very very good book. But Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus. Camus is Camus. Camus, Albert Camus. Some people probably read L'Étranger or The Stranger in high school, but The Myth of Sisyphus, very, very good book as well, because it gets down to this depth of essentially Sisyphus is the guy who's banished to the underworld to roll the boulder uphill. And then when it gets to the top, it rolls back down. And so essentially what Camus talks about is this idea that one must imagine Sisyphus happy, meaning our life is about struggle. Like you can see it in wealthy people. If life was about ease and getting to an easy point, then you wouldn't have rich, wealthy, powerful people committing suicide or doing drugs or being reckless. They would be perfectly content in this nirvana. The real belief, in my opinion, and something that comes out of Camus is that we're forced to struggle, and that is something that should be a positive thing. And so when he says one must imagine Sisyphus happy, he's conveying this idea that Sisyphus rolls this boulder uphill. It's not about getting to that top of the hill, because he accepts what's going to happen. He knows he's done it, for all eternity. He's happy in the struggle. He's happy in the existence. He's happy in the very basis that the boulder is his thing. He is one with it, and his existence is not about the end result. It's about doing it. It's kind of like your favorite song. You don't get a favorite song and play it to the very end as fast as you can. You enjoy it while it's playing, and hopefully you'll get another chance to listen to that song again and again and again, and just enjoy it when it's playing.
Awesome. We'll put all those links into our show notes. Another one we'll try and put some links into, or at least reference. This one's called Take Action. So number 4, what actions can you recommend to our audience they can start using to improve their life and their liberty, and mostly kind of to help them unplug from the state?
So the most important thing I think that a lot of people don't do, and Jordan Peterson, I'm sure you guys know about, he's a very brilliant guy.
I just found him last week. Love him.
Yeah, very, very good dude. One thing that I love that he approaches very, very strict with his therapy sessions is the acceptance of the darkness within you and the understanding of it. And I like to kind of take it out of that realm and take it more into the realm of the fact that you should open yourself up to all ideas, not accept them, not give them value as in a positive tinge, but say, you know what, this is my bias. I understand what my bias is. I grew up this way. I had this experience. I've had these different various things happen in my life, and so I've got these biases in my life. I see, I was talking to somebody about today where I live in an area that's kind of very hip and young, and you have a lot of sorority sisters who 5 or 6 of them will be walking down the street screeching, drunk off their mind, whatever. And my immediate bias is like, they're stupid, they're idiotic, yada, yada, yada. When that's my bias, that's not a reflection of reality. It could have been on some previous experiences of mine, but I'm putting some kind of a judgment call on people that in reality, if I would have talked to them or engaged dialogue or just looked at them for what they were and not what I put around a bias, then maybe I could have learned something. And so when you think about your own biases and the things that you hold dear to you on a belief system basis, you also should really open yourself up to the exact opposite of that. One of the reasons why I'm not a Catholic anymore is because, and oddly, I don't find much value in him now, but I read the Discords, Plato, Aristotle, a couple of these old philosophers, And one of the things that got me was there was some stuff that Plato stated that was legit the opposite of what my Catholic belief said. Yet I sat there and said, I get it, I understand it. And so then that opened up this angle to me of saying, well, if this makes sense, then how can I guarantee that this thing on this other side is true as well? Is there two truths, or are they both wrong? And that opened up my ability to start reading more philosophy and then get into existentialism and then get all crazy depressed with Nietzsche and some poor guy in Winnipeg, Canada. But the very essence of that was the fact that I didn't uphold this strict, no, I'm Catholic, leave me alone, stay away from me, sinner. It was more of this idea of, you know what? Let me hear you. I don't agree with you, but let me hear you. I don't want to be in an echo chamber because nothing's ever learned in an echo chamber. Everything that's of value, every conversation that I enjoy is when someone has an opinion that doesn't align up to mine. If it was five Jakes in a room, that's a hella boring room.
That's a good band name, though.
Five Jakes in a
Jake's
room?
room.
I'm copywriting it.
All right. Last one, Jake. This is called recommended reading. So do you have any recommended reading? Obviously, the ones you just mentioned, or YouTubing or podcasting or anything for liberty or for your specific topics that you talked about today that people can look into?
So I think so there's a lot of philosophical YouTube videos that you can type in. You can even type in Camus, Nietzsche, and get some kind of an overview of them to kind of understand where they're coming from. If you really want to delve into existentialism, some of them are harder reading than others. I would definitely recommend looking at some videos, kind of explaining some of those philosophers so you can get a basis of where they're coming from. A lot of them are very reflective of their time in life and the society that they were living in. Algeria, France, and Russia. Tulsi is very, very good. There's a couple other ones that I'm going to drop, but I would say what the most important thing for you as an individual to do would be to look up a topic and get invested in it and understand it, and then kind of follow path to more topics that are associated with it. My dad always said you can't fight gravity, and he always told me this growing up. And this is in relation to my cybersecurity world and my computer world, because back when I was growing up, which I act like that was a long time ago, but it was only in the 90s. Computers were not the cool thing, and I admit that. I mean, like when everybody else was going to prom, I was sitting there playing Quake and Team Fortress and things of that nature, and that was not cool. And so when I got to this point to where I wanted to be quote unquote cool, I went to criminology, which I think is great and cool and everything. But my dad always told me, you're going to go back to computers, Jake. You're going to go back to computers. And he said, you can't fight gravity. And I never understood what that meant until, well, I went back to computers. And what that means for me is that the individual, every single person has an affinity naturally for something. And you could fight against it. But that second that you actually say, you know what, I've fought against this my whole life. I'm going to just turn around and I'm going to just invest myself into it. I'm naturally into this. Let's see where it takes me. I really think that that's what separates people out in society. My career has been a pretty crazy wild ride, because I literally went from living in Johannesburg, South Africa, to getting a job with KPMG in Dallas, to going to virtually the top of the cybersecurity industry within 5 years. And I've never taken a computer class in college in my life. It was because it was a natural affinity that I just bought into. I enjoy. It's something I do even if I wasn't getting paid for it. That's a pretty crappy guidance counselor kind of a question. But I think what it is people need to just sit back, take a full assessment of themselves. What are they naturally attracted to? And if it is something nerdy, like I'm admitting to whoever listens to this from now until the future, I like professional wrestling. I love it. I like indie wrestling. I like it. It's my thing. There are things in the world that you're naturally attracted to, and if someone thinks it's stupid, well, then that's not somebody you want in your life. There's stuff that you can do with anime. There's stuff you can do with fantasy stuff. There's stuff you can do with Pokemon. If you buy into it and you listen to what you're naturally good at, whatever that may be, that's what's going to separate you out from every single other person in the world.
Awesome. Jake, I'm going to give the audience some insider info here. This is one of the first interviews we've done with no outline and no kind of direction. We just turned on the mic and started talking. And I got to tell you, man, it was super easy going and I loved it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm very happy. This is a very good way to do Thursday. And I'm going to now walk across the streets and enjoy my Thirsty Thursday as well. So
Awesome, man. Okay, well, we're going to close out the show, and we'll be more than happy to have you back soon when Ox is also available for us.
Yeah, we'll talk cryptocurrency and stuff
Oh
like that.
yeah,
Big
Satoshi
time.
Nakamoto, let's do it.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, folks, thanks for sticking around. And since we talked about some really cool conspiracy stuff today, today's quick hidden bonus feature is I'm going to play a little clip from a friend of mine named James Corbett. And it's going to give you one of our most recent conspiracies. Actually, it's not. Jeez, it's been over a decade. Okay, one of our nation's biggest recent conspiracies in a nutshell. Enjoy.
On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon and the Budget Analyst Office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
Nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, Nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her. And her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about...
His head could be seen to move violently forward.
And...
They took the babies out of the incubators.
And...
Mobile production facilities.
And...
The rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit, paranoid, tinfoil, dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, MSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. Because ignorance is strength.